Hi, I'm Terry Burns, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the work of Dr. Heinrich Khunrath. I'm going to be looking at it, though, through a particular lens because I'm looking at it as part of a course on John Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica using the translation I did with Dr. Nancy Turner. And one of the things that have hurt other translations of the monad, like the great translation done by C.H. Jostin in 1964, was the assumption that it was a work of alchemy, and particularly physical alchemy. No question it's a work of spiritual alchemy. And one of the things that I asked myself while doing this translation was, why? And of course, as an answer to that why, I looked at a lot of works that relied on the hieroglyphic monad. One of them is the one I'm going to talk about today, the Amphitheatrum Sapientiae Aeternae, or the Amphitheater or Theater of Eternal Wisdom or Knowledge of Dr. Heinrich Khunrath. This comes out in 1595. The Monas Hieroglyphica, remember, is 1564. And so we're going to look at this work written in Dee's lifetime to see, well, what is it, first of all, then how it connects to Dee. And those of you who are taking my class on the Monas Hieroglyphica, link to that again is below, probably can guess. It's going to have 3 sacred languages. There are going to be Pythagorean, Neoplatonic, Kabbalah-infused physical alchemy. With Dee, it's just alchemy. With Khunrath, it's physical alchemy. All right, so I want to answer these questions in this presentation. Of course, who is Khunrath? What is his interest in the work of Dee? But then what can that tell us about why he and other people, because I'm just using him as the most famous example of people like Gerald Dorn and César de la Riviera, who are interested in the Monas Hieroglyphica as a work that explains physical alchemy. This question is really interesting since we know Dee had no success at physical alchemy. He may well have tragically starved to death. Also, we know at the time, up to the time he wrote the Monas Hieroglyphica, he seems to have had no interest in it, let alone practice at it. He is a scholar's scholar. He's traveling around collecting books, giving lectures. And it's not until the 1580s that we see Dee attempting any alchemical experiments at all, and those aren't terribly successful. And I'm thinking here about the things with like horse dung that he refers to in his private diary and so forth. Okay, now, those of you who are in my class on the hieroglyphic monad know that we are not approaching the hieroglyphic monad as instructions to physical alchemy. You have much greater success in understanding of it if you approach it on the terms that Dee sets up in his letter to Maximilian, which is as a cosmogenic text, that is a text about the creation of the universe that uses the Bible, that uses Neoplatonic sources like the Timaeus, and it explores sacred geometry, Euclidean, but not only Euclidean, geography. We can even, and will later, look at it as a precursor to his Enochian work, if we want to think of how Dee sets up his temple or something like that. But we have ignored the aspects connected to physical alchemy because, well, I'm teaching the course and I don't think they're terribly relevant. But physical alchemy is of great interest to many people. So I do want to talk about it and show that I have explored those avenues and have found other explanations for how this association is made. Largely it's because of Edward Kelly. And we can see this on display in this work of Khunrath. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. If my screen will progress here we go. If you're watching this video at all, you know who John Dee is already. You hopefully know what the Monas Hieroglyphica is. Hopefully you're in my class on the Monas Hieroglyphica, but you may not know Heinrich Khunrath. This is the most famous engraving of him, and it comes from this very work that we're talking about. I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's a German Paracelsian physician and hermeticist. The first time we know that he meets Dee is in 1589. This is at the end of John Dee and Edward Kelly's 5 years on the European continent, primarily but not exclusively in Bohemia or the present-day Czech Republic, and Dee is returning to England. He thinks Kelly's going to join him in England, though Kelly never does. In 1588, Khunrath had also been at Rudolf II's court in Prague, where we know he met Edward Kelly there. We don't know if he met Dee because Dee may not have been there. Dee was mainly in Trebon then. Judging from Khunrath's later work, the one I'm talking about today, he must have been very impressed with Dee because he quotes Dee a lot. And that is what led me to examine this work. Now, I don't claim to be the greatest expert on this work. I think the greatest expert on this work in the world is probably Dr. Peter Forshaw, whose work I'm going to give you a bibliography of at the end, and also the work of Dr. Jennifer Rampling, who has written a lot about physical alchemy. All right, so, but just in the interest of getting this information out to a more popular audience, the Theater of Eternal Wisdom is, again, why many scholars have associated the Monus Hieroglyphica with physical alchemy, particularly this unusual type of Kabbalah-based alchemy. Now, this particular stream of physical alchemy doesn't die out with Khunrath. It continues for literally hundreds of years, up to the beginnings of, say, the men who founded the original Order of the Golden Dawn. Before that, Frederick Hockley is copying texts that have to do with this time period. And they are referencing back to Dee and Kelly. The earliest example of it that I've talked about in my class on the monads is the Voarchidumia of Pantheus or Pantia, which is a work heavily annotated by Dee. I've got a link to my video on that below also. Some people thought that Khunrath was, like Dee, just interested in spiritual alchemy, but the work of Peter Forshaw has hopefully disabused them of that. Khunrath is showing an alchemy lab and talking about physical steps that you take to achieve the spiritual purpose of the Philosopher's Stone, the summum bonum, the great work. I've mentioned that Dee meets Khunrath on his way back to England after he and Kelly part ways. Now, an important thing to know here is, according to Dee's private diary, and his spiritual diary, he had two diaries, he says that Kelly has achieved the Philosopher's Stone. It says 1587 in Trebona, where he says Edward Kelly gave a public demonstration of the Philosopher's Stone. I've written an article on that. It's one that I need to revise, but I've stuck a link to it below too. And it's not only Dee that says Kelly has done this. Others are eyewitnesses to this. So Kelly has quite a bit of street cred on this. Now, we may say today, oh, he was just a trickster, this was fraud. Who knows what it is? I'm saying in Kelly's time, people believed Kelly had done it. He was the only one who had done it at that time, though there are some suggestions that others earlier, like Thomas Norton, had. That too is another story. So when Kelly and Dee part, Dee writes again that, not that Kelly has done it, but this time that Kelly has shown Dee the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. If Kelly has shown that to Dee, well, Dee doesn't have a lot of success doing it later, or else maybe he's just disinterested. He doesn't even exactly say what he means by the Philosopher's Stone. And this is something you see with other people as well. Think of the great Elias Ashmole, who at one time in his diary, now Ashmole, if you don't know him, is the person who put together all the texts in Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, an incredible compendium of English writers on alchemy. But he writes in his diary that his Rosicrucian father, Backhouse, has opened the great secret to him. Awesome. But of course, he doesn't say what it is. So that's a problem. Not for him, but for any of us who are interested in it. Okay. If you know the story of Edward Kelly, what happens is that after he and Dee part ways, and even before, Kelly is achieving great fame. He becomes a Golden Knight. We know from the work of Raphael Prink that by Golden Knight here, it's not exactly that Rudolph knights him, but that his knighthood from elsewhere, Ireland presumably, is being recognized. And he has an amazing rise and fall through 1587. Jennifer Rampling has written about the scholarship on the physical alchemy aspect of it that is unparalleled. If you just want to know Kelly's story as story, I would recommend this book by Vincent Bridges, An Alchemical Enigma, A Short History of the Rise and Fall of Sir Edward Kelly. Of course, since I helped edit that book, that's kind of self-serving, but it is a very good book. So my short answer to why Dee gets associated with physical alchemy, other than Dee wants that association, is because Dee is associated with Kelly. And some things about Kelly here. Kelly, if you achieve the Philosopher's Stone, you are supposed to also be kind of spiritually exalted. One of the reasons that some alchemists give for why they can't do the great transmutation is they sort of blame the alchemist assistant, like they're not spiritually advanced enough. Well, Kelly is, let's say, doesn't come across as someone super spiritually advanced. He's rough, he swears a lot, he beats people up and threatens them, and he's just not terribly polished. But meanwhile, his colleague John Dee is very well spoken, very intelligent, a recognized scholar. So people would assume perhaps that Kelly has applied what he has learned from Dee. I mean, there's still the problem of Kelly, all of Kelly's other hijinks. Also, Dee's library does have all kinds of work of physical alchemy in it. Again, to cite Jennifer Rampling's research, Dee has a copy of English alchemist George Ripley's Compound of Alchemy. That's his most famous work, but Dee also has Ripley's more private personal notes, his bosom book, and that gets distributed around Central Europe by people associated with Kelly after Dee leaves. Side note about the Compound of Alchemy, it of course is in Latin. It's not translated into English, even though Ripley is English, until 1593. And when it comes out, there is a poem by Kelly on physical alchemy, and there is a poem paying homage to John Dee. So I'll just quote an article of Rampling's. You can see the citation to at the end. And as I've mentioned, I'll also give you a bibliography of some of these articles. Rampling says, in her work on Dee, John Dee and the Alchemists, practicing and promoting English alchemy in the Holy Roman Empire, she says about Kelly that his reputation as an alchemist enabled him to obtain imperial favor and a position at Rudolph's court, where his claims of noble Irish descent were validated by the conferral of a knighthood and the opportunity to amass considerable property. Right? Kelly quickly becomes very rich, very fast. He's the expert on physical alchemy because people believe he's done it. Kelly's rise is mirrored by an increasing interest in the works of George Ripley in East Central Europe, which seem to have made their Bohemian debut at about the same time. And then she shows you that these works of Ripley were works that Dee had, but it's Kelly who is left there and is promoting these works. So while Ripley's fame spreads in Central Europe and Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, particularly and especially Northwestern Europe, you get an influence of Dee. That brings us back to Khunrath, and we're going to look at the opening page of his Amphitheater of Eternal Wisdom, which he is going to describe as physical chemistry, Christian Kabbalah. He's actually the first person to explicitly use that term, Christian Kabbalah, even though you could trace it all the way back to Pico della Mandrilla and Agrippa and Reuchlin, folks like that. Khunrath is the first to actually use the term. And divine magic. He's got another work on magic and alchemy. Like John Dee, the overlap between magic and alchemy is total with Khunrath. Now, with Dee, it's spiritual alchemy, I would say, intentionally or unintentionally, because Dee has no success with physical alchemy. But Khunrath is explicitly talking about laboratory work. There's a copy of this for any of you near me here in Wisconsin, over at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in their special collections. It's a glorious work to look at just in terms of art. I mean, the engravings in this are taught by art historians, and I'm going to show you 4 of them before we're done here. In any case, it's one of several reasons and the easiest to show you rather than give you a long article about why there is this association between the monist and physical alchemy. That plate that just flew by there, that's one of these 4 large engravings, and I'm going to just zoom in on the engraving in the middle. This is called the first stage of the great work, better known as the Alchemist Laboratory. Again, a physical laboratory. De Vries, who did this, is related to the Theodore de Vries, if you know the work of Dame Frances Yates, who she talks about the de Vries family and their connection to many published works of Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism. So this work of Khunrath is framed as a search for the prima materia of alchemy that is going to lead to eternal Christian wisdom. Now, I will give you below and at the end this citation again. But if you want to know more about Khunrath, please read the work of Peter Forshaw. Peter Forshaw is, I think, the world expert on Khunrath, at least at the time of this video. And I am making no attempt to go through every part of this incredibly complicated but beautiful work. Here's the second circular plate. I'm not going to treat it totally as eye candy, though. Let's just zoom in on it a little bit so you can see the kind of thing he's doing. Along with pages of text in Latin, of course, you read around the edges of this. So this starts with the philosopher's stone is. What is the philosopher's stone? Well, he's going to tell you. He's also going to combine the same three languages Dee did. You have some Greek here. This is in Latin. You have Hebrew down here. In fact, these two letters are often used for, those of you who are in my class on the hieroglyphic monad know that when you get to the sort of Big Bang in Theorem 10, where you flip the monad glyph over, you've had fire from the top making the tree of life, the 10 Sephiroth. And then to restore it, you have fire up from the bottom. Well, if you had another letter here, you would have, basically, if you added a bet there, you would have Bereshit in the beginning of the Hebrew Bible. You drop that off and you have Aleph Shin. Now you have the act of creating it up from the bottom. Okay, there's a Pythagorean tetractys that we've talked a lot about, but I want to look less at the words here since we have limited time and just give you one example, and the example is going to be this bird here. Now, those of you who have made rose crosses and so on may see similarities between what's going on there. This is really something you could explore a lot on your own if you're interested in it. But what I want to show you is just this alchemical bird. Dee had an alchemical bird, a peacock, and you get the rainbow phase of physical alchemy. And right here where it says Azoth, you have Dee's monus glyph making the O in Azoth. So in fact, this symbol that is the O in Azoth would be the sun symbol, which is also the Pythagorean symbol for the whole monad, a circle with a dot in the middle. And you can associate it with Tifereth, gold, the sun, S-U-N, S-O-N, and so forth. So this is Dee's moneth glyph. Azoth, to alchemists of the time, represents the change from prima materia to ultima materia. Zetzner, who publishes or republishes Dee's monus hieroglyphica in Frankfurt in 1609, says that. And of course, Forshaw quotes that in his article about this. So you get the word Azoth from the Latin A and Z, the Greek Alpha and Omega, the Hebrew Aleph and Tau, that is the first and last letters of these three sacred alphabets. The monus glyph appears somewhere else in here. It appears atop the engraving called the Alchemist Citadel. I'm not engraving it here simply because of the limitations of this small YouTube screen. By the time I blow it up big enough to show it to you, it looks like a big blur. Here's the third circular plate. You can see why these are works of art. This is the middle section blown up. We could go through and analyze this in terms of some of the concepts in the hieroglyphic monad, but there again, we're not with the hieroglyphic monad assuming that the philosopher's stone is going to allow us to change lead into gold. Khunrath is. Also that it's going to bring perfect health and true happiness and a lot of other things. This triangle we've seen many times, right? Associated not only with the tetractys, but with the tetrahedron, the Platonic solid associated with fire in Plato's Timaeus. We've seen the fire creating the tree of life, and then we'll put the fire underneath and resurrect that tree. All these associations are also in Khunrath. This is the fourth plate. And unlike others, like Athanasius Kircher, who I've given kind of a hard time to, or Gerald Dorn, who Dee explicitly complains about in this copy of the Monas Hieroglyphica that I believe it's Connecticut in the colonial US, the Winthrop family has a copy of Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica. And they also have something that is inscribed with a work of Dorn that has this comment by Dee, basically saying, look, he's taking all my characters and not even acknowledging me. All right, Khunrath does acknowledge Dee. I mean, Khunrath seems like a good guy. He's not interested in stealing other people's stuff. He gives credit to his old friend. He makes the same distinction that Dee makes in the letter to Maximilian between real and grammatical or real and spoken Kabbalah, and he makes the same Greek associations that Dee does to an eternal real world of being. So you have this Kabbalah of being associated with the world of perfect forms, a Neoplatonic world of perfect forms, and a mutable world of becoming, where everything is in motion and changes into something else, just as the spoken words we say vanish or change into something else. So here you have the section where Khunrath does that. There's the real Kabbalah, the grammatical Kabbalah, and so on. All right. I'm just going to draw conclusions now and hopefully leave you to explore more of the wonderful work of Heinrich Khunrath on your own if you're interested in physical alchemy, because I am not going to be exploring physical alchemy very much in my class on the monad. Khunrath and some later writers are influenced by Dee as a physical alchemist, largely because of the apparent success of Edward Kelly. Dee was a theorist, but you can see why they would make the assumption, even though Dee was not a successful physical alchemist, that Kelly got these ideas from Dee and applied them, like Kelly was the guy in the lab. Even in Dee's spirit diary, which is supposed to be private, but for a variety of reasons, I suspect was not totally private. Anyway, Dee describes Kelly as being the guy in the laboratory. He's making things, and sometimes he's getting drunk from the wine in the distillery and so on. But many people believe Kelly had applied the works first owned or written by Dee. And Kelly's own alchemical writing, by the way, shows a heavy influence of works attributed to Dee. I hope I get the chance to present on that sometime. But now, one of them, the Tuba Veneris, which I also translated with Dr. Turner, may not have actually been by Dee, or maybe it was, but you really see Kelly referring to the Horn of Venus. But you also see the organization of the hieroglyphic monad, if you understand the hieroglyphic monad, is all through the few works we have of Kelly. So we've seen Dee's influence on display in this work by Khunrath. And if you want to know more about this, here is further scholarly reading I would suggest. I'd suggest you read Peter Forshaw's works on Khunrath, and that you would look at Jennifer Rampley's works, especially her book, The Experimental Fire on English Alchemy. And then she has a couple articles, one of which is listed below, explicitly focusing on the work of Dee. Okay, I'm going to paste that whole list in below too. Thanks for listening. Hope I see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.